So guess what? Expensive knitting notions, expensive yarn, expensive gadgets do not change the way your finished piece looks at all. So I'm here to tell you how you can knit on a budget and tell you that knitting can be a cheap hobby. You can buy cheap things and your finished piece will still look amazing, you'll still love it, you'll still enjoy knitting, and you don't have to spend loads of money. So this video is for everyone really, whether you're a new knitter, feeling a bit daunted about all the expensive things out there, the things you need. It's for experienced knitters who maybe want to change the way they knit, want to change their budget. It's also for crochet, but I'll use the word knit just because I do, even though I'm wearing a crochet cardigan. Knitting and crochet. I've been knitting for 5 years and crocheting for about a year or two. I can't remember. And everything mentioned here, apart from the knitting needles, is can go with crochet as well. So I thought I would start off with the big one, free patterns. The paid patterns get more promotion, but there is so many free patterns out there, like thousands of free patterns. So from my experience, I found it's a lot better to go for patterns that have photographs. Whether that's a photograph the designer's taken, a photograph someone who knitted it has taken. It's best to have a few photographs because then you know it's a good pattern. Because the thing with knitting is it takes your time, it takes your money, it takes your effort, and if there's no pictures of the pattern, you have no idea how good it's going to be, and it just becomes a waste of time, money. So a website I use quite a lot is allfreeknitting.com. They have free ebooks, free patterns. Lovecrafts has a whole section, a website dedicated to free patterns. And I found if you're wanting to knit garments, Hobby is excellent for free patterns. They have jumpers, cardigans, tops. It has the crochet this, it has crochet granny squares cardigans, it has chunky knitted cardigans, it has everything. And it has a lot of blankets for free, socks, hats, toys, basically everything you need without spending a single penny. And We Are Knitters is also great for free patterns. They are the company that is known for expensive kits, expensive yarn, expensive patterns, but they also have a whole section dedicated to free patterns and they're brilliant. Ravelry is also great for free patterns. Just make sure when you go into the filters you press free. They have thousands of them, thousands. This is a website where you need to look for photographs. We Are Knitters, Hobby, Lovecrafts, they have really professional photographs and in different colours and things like that. Ravelry is one person making a pattern. So you'll find with some free patterns, there's just one photograph and that is what the designer has made. I tend to stray away from those. I tend to go for, like I say, patterns that have lots of photographs because you know it's good. And as well with the photographs, they maybe haven't used the yarn suggested, so you can see what it looks like in other yarns as well, like cheaper yarns. Brilliant way to get patterns, not for free but for cheap, is books. Knitting books have like 10 plus patterns in and they cost like £4 upwards, and patterns are usually starting from £3 upwards, so it's so much cheaper to get a knitting book. Even if you don't like every single pattern, it's still cheaper to buy the book for a few patterns than it is to buy those patterns separately. And the best way to get free knitting books is the library. The library has loads of knitting books, crochet books, sewing, just the library basically. And another great shop for cheap knitting books and crochet books is The Work. So that could be online or in real life. I found this years ago, it's 35 patterns and it cost me like £3.50. And The Works doesn't ever seem to change prices. They're very good at like keeping things like this nice and cheap. And if you like knitting but you're not into modern on-trend things or chunky knitting and you want something a bit different, I found that vintageknittingpatternarchive.com is brilliant for vintage patterns. It starts from the 1920s and it goes up to 1980. So I found with this website that it's best to use a PC or a laptop or I guess an iPad. I sound so old. Phone's a big no, you could probably even use your phone. It's best to have a big screen to see this website because it is scans of vintage magazines and vintage leaflets, or it's PDF downloads of those scans. I love this site because it is scanned like magazines and leaflets. You can see the notes that other knitters have made and it's so cool. And you can see the creases because obviously it's very, very old and it really shows, and I just love that. The thing about crochet and knitting is the patterns never change. Through so many years, through advances in technology, it's just amazing to me that knitting patterns and crochet patterns have never changed. And lastly, on the free patterns is a brilliant Facebook group called Free Ravelry Patterns, period. They're very serious with the period because it is just free patterns. I'm kind of joking, but it's very, very good. It's one lady who runs it, and she posts patterns every single day. So she posts patterns that she finds, and these could be free all the time, or she could have found some special code to make the pattern free just for 24 hours. The next part is to reuse patterns. You don't just get a pattern and make it once, you could make it again using a different yarn, different colours. If it's a shawl or a blanket, you could add a different border, you could play around with the stitches, and even if you don't do any of that and you just change the colour, it's brilliant. My favourite pattern, it's a paid pattern, but I've made 4-5 of them so far. It's a Sophie scarf, and I've definitely got my money's worth out of that. So the next thing is cheap yarn. The cheapest yarn I've ever found is 60p for 100 grams of DK, and like, you cannot get cheaper than that. You could knit a jumper for like £6. What's not to love? And that is on the Yorkshire Trading Company. I'm not sure of the quality of this one, but for 60p you can't complain. So because I'm not sure of the quality of that one, the next one I found is Stylecraft Special DK, which is £2.19. That's my go-to. It's acrylic, but it doesn't feel like it. It's really soft. So sticking with yarn, another tip is to use thin yarn. The thinner the yarn, the longer it lasts, the more of a thing you can make. Because chunky yarn's more expensive and it doesn't go as far, a lot more yarn goes into chunky stitches because they're bigger and it uses a lot more yarn. So there's a problem in the knitting world of people making patterns, whether they're paid or they're free, and then suggesting the most expensive yarn in the world. I hate this, but luckily I've been using this website for years and it's brilliant. Yarnsub.com. You go into the website, you type what yarn the pattern suggests, and it gives you like 10, 15, so many options for different yarns. It's brilliant. So this website has the suggested yarns that match the yarn the pattern suggests. It tells you the texture of the yarn, what it looks like finished, what gauge it needs. It tells you the fibre content, and it also tells you how many balls of yarn you'll need to substitute the yarn you've put in originally, which is really, really good. And it also suggests the colour options for that yarn. So you put the yarn you want to substitute in and it matches it in percentage. For example, it could be like 82% matching the one the pattern suggests. But I have found it hardly ever goes below 85%, which is excellent. The reason I love this site is I wanted to make this cat jumper. I'm not sure if I still do, it seems a bit overwhelming. But the yarn the pattern suggests would cost me £100, and because it's something that kind of scared me, I was like, I'm not going to spend £100 on yarn, because what if it goes wrong? This whole video, the whole point of this video, you don't want to spend £100 because that's so much money. So I went to the website and it gave me the suggested yarn, and this jumper is kind of like chunky yarn. So I just bought this yarn and held two together to make it chunky. It was very similar texture, very similar, excellent colours, like almost matching. And it went from being a £100 project to a £34 project. And I still have the bag because I'm scared to knit this. So this is what it suggested I should buy instead. That website does all the maths for you. It's brilliant. So yeah, all this for £34. And this is how I discovered Stylecraft. So for a £100 project to £34 with still quality yarn, I would not have done that without the website. I would have just not knit the jumper. So that is an excellent website, which I highly suggest using. And you will be so much happier. So if I wanted to, I can make 3 jumpers for less than the actual cost of 1 jumper, which I just think is amazing. So now on to things you don't need. There are so many things out there, like gadgets, that you think you might need, but trust me, you don't need any of them. So stitch markers you don't need, scrap yarn will do. But if you don't need scrap yarn and you want stitch markers, the best ones I've found are, they look like little light bulbs, and you can get a pack of 200 and it costs you £7.19 with free postage. It is from China, but you don't mind waiting because it's so cheap and it's 200. You don't need yarn fabric scissors, like the basic kitchen scissors that you use to open parcels or your pasta or whatever. Just normal scissors. You don't need fabric scissors, yarn scissors. You don't need a yarn bowl. Literally anything bowl shaped will do. A cereal bowl, a teapot, a baking bowl, a pan, a colander. The point of a yarn bowl is to keep your yarn contained, so anything that keeps it contained will do. You don't need expensive knitting needles, especially when you're new to knitting, because you're learning and you don't want to become overwhelmed straight away by buying expensive needles and thinking, oh, I've spent all this money, I have to be a good knitter. You get cheap needles, you take your time to learn, you feel no pressure. Maybe when you're more comfortable with knitting, you can ask for some for a birthday or Christmas or special occasion. When I first learned to knit, that's what I did. I was knitting for about a year, I'd say. Then I asked for like nice needles. And when I was learning how to knit, my mum taught me, so she gave me some of her needles. I found a pack of 11 pairs on Amazon. They go from size 2 to size 8, and that they are £8.99, and honestly, you can't go wrong. That kind of covers every single size you're going to need. You also don't need blocking mats. A towel will do. This is what I did when I first learned how to knit. I just used a towel. I don't even have the proper blocking mats. The ones that come with like the measurements. I have children's play squares and they work perfectly. You also don't need pins. You can get away with it if it's wet enough and you shape it properly and you lay it flat and leave it long enough to dry. You can get away with not using pins. You also don't need fancy yarns. It's just fancy yarns this, fancy yarns that. Fancy yarns are everywhere, but you don't need fancy yarns. They start from like £20 for one skein, 100 grams, and that is so much money. You can get that yarn like similar quality, same kind of colours for a lot cheaper. It's my favourite sock yarn that isn't an expensive hank skein thing is Signet. They do so many nice colours. They're really cheap. West Yorkshire Spinners, I love their sock yarn because it all kind of has a theme. My favourite one from them is they have a bird theme, so they have robin, blue tit, and they're all like sock yarn that relates to that bird, which is really cool. So yeah, you don't need expensive hanks or anything like that. As presents, of course, and same with yarn balls and needles. The thing when you have a hobby like knitting or crochet, there's always present choices for people. If no one knows what to get you, that they can always get you something crochet or knitting related, and they're never stuck for ideas, which is great about knitting. And if you're brave enough, you can ask for yarn balls, ask for the needles, ask for a nice hank if they don't know what that is, because most people don't. Knitting is kind of, it starts off cheapish and then you kind of feel the pressure to keep on going up and up and up, but you can just stick with cheap things forever. Like I said at the beginning of this video, the knitting notions, the yarn doesn't change the way your finished piece looks, especially if you use that yarn sub website that I recommended. It will pretty much look exactly the same as the expensive yarn the pattern suggests. So this is another idea, which is to repurpose old yarn. Whether that's putting a project out that you no longer like, or whether that's going to a charity shop, finding the jumper with nice yarn, pulling the jumper out. Another thing about charity shops is you won't always find yarn, but sometimes you do. So in the past year or so, I found 2 kits, a knitting one, a crochet one. I found 200 grams of merino yarn that was 50p just shoved in a food bag. I found a 50p DK yarn, like a lovely mint colour. If you're not able to find yarn, you can, like I said, repurpose an old jumper, but that is quite daunting, pulling the jumper out. So in charity shops, there's a lot of hand knitted scarves. You can just buy that and reuse the yarn. Another last little tip for charity shops is go after Christmas. So many gifts are given to charity shops that people don't want. And I found this in January. It's a knitted snood. And it's thrum knit, and I can tell it's hand dyed yarn. It's expensive yarn, it's super soft, it's lovely texture. A lot of effort has gone into this. So I do feel bad for the person who made it, but happy for me. But this is a good example. You don't always find things in charity shops, but you can find gems. I'm not going to pull this out. I've actually been wearing it as a snood because it's just perfect. And thrum yarn isn't cheap, so whoever received this as a present is a bit of a... I don't like them. It's big as well, so if you did want to pull this out, that would be a lot of yarn. I think it is more than 100 grams because it's very, very big. That was £4. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I do feel like I've missed something. I think I've covered everything, but I probably haven't. So if you can think of any tips, advice, websites, please comment below, because I would love to know and it would help the people watching this video. The thing with knitting is, like, I just feel like we've got to help everyone. It's like a community, and I don't want to let people down by doing this video wrong. So I hope I've helped you enough in this video to help you become a budget knitter or knitting for cheap. And if you're new to knitting, don't feel daunted about the prices. It can be cheap. Let's say you wanted to knit tomorrow, you had nothing in your house, and you wanted to buy some yarn. Let's say you were going to buy a 60p yarn, and you were going to, let's just say you wanted to knit a scarf. So 2 balls, and remember you had to include postage with this as well. So 2 balls from the Yorkshire Trading Company. Postage is actually more expensive than the yarn. £4.69 for 2 balls and the postage and the needles. That's all you need. If you wanted to knit tomorrow, it would cost you £13.68 including postage, and really you cannot go wrong with that. And the needles are size 2 to 8, so you're kind of set for life really, unless you do super chunky knitting, because size 8 is quite chunky still. If you said to someone, you can learn to knit for £13.68, they just wouldn't believe you. But you can. So yes, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. And let me know if you have any advice, or if you're a new knitter, how you're finding the cost of things, or if this video has been helpful. Yes, it is quite daunting coming on YouTube and giving you advice, and you follow it, and I'm kind of responsible for your budgeting. But it doesn't matter. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye. And YouTube is great for tutorials too, because there's free tutorials, which I completely forgot to mention. There's free tutorials and free patterns on YouTube. So I'm back, as I completely forgot to mention a really good one, which is eBay. So go onto eBay, type yarn in and select used, and people are getting rid of bundles, their stashes. It's such good quality. I got Karen Pantone 3 skeins for £9.50, and they go for £8.99 brand new. And they also are no longer making that yarn. So you also get yarn that's gone out of the system, and unique yarn you don't really find as well. So there's job lots. I think it's because people are getting rid of their stashes. You can buy a yarn online and not like it, and then not want to return it, so that's another reason why they're on there as well. I got some yarn years ago and I'm still using it. It was a big 10-pack DK, and I'm using it for little projects. So you can get a big bundle and it will last you like for years and years. You can either obviously go for bidding, or you can select buy it now, which was obviously the faster way, but it doesn't really go super expensive on eBay. It's a very safe place for yarn. So yeah, that's another thing that I forgot to mention, and hopefully the only thing. Okay, bye.